Anna, for the introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Nice and loud? Well, it's great to be here with you this evening. Like Anna said, I'm Becky. I'm going to talk a little bit about bird disturbance and how we try and reduce that along the Sunderland coastline, and a bit about Coast Sunderland, our project, what we're up to. So the plan for this evening is to talk a little bit about the background of the project, how did we get here, why it exists. So I'm going to talk about coastal designations, what they are, why they're important, how we protect them, a little bit about recreational disturbance, the need for mitigation, and then the Coast Sunderland project delivery to date. But before we start with that, the brief for this talk said to kind of talk a little bit about yourself and your story, and I thought, oh God, because that's, everyone hates doing that, and it's always difficult, but I'm going to stick to the brief and talk a little bit about me first. So here I am, probably about 4 years old, at Washington Wildfowl Park, feeding the geese. So I've always loved wildlife, always wanted to work with wildlife, not really sure how to get into it, didn't know what I wanted to do. And I took the kind of non-typical route to go into a career in conservation. So I went to the University of Leeds, where I studied psychology. While I was doing psychology, I took different modules, and some of those were in animal behaviour, which I absolutely loved. And I managed to kind of convince the animal behaviour lecturer to let me do a dissertation project with him for my third year. And we did a project looking at the effects of alarm call playback on wild herring gulls. So that was amazing. I loved it. I loved doing the field work. I love gulls. Not everyone here. Well, maybe people here do. I don't know. Who likes gulls? Can I see hands? Okay, great. Yeah, I've always loved gulls, found them really interesting. So really got stuck into field work. From there, I stayed at the University of Leeds and went on to do a Masters in Biodiversity and Conservation. And stuck with the seabird research and found myself, for my dissertation project, for my Masters, on Bass Rock, working with the gannets, which is an amazing place. If anyone's been to Bass Rock, it's pretty indescribable. From the minute you step onto the rock there, every single sense is kind of attacked. So eyes, ears, smell, it's just an incredible place. So it was great to get some hands-on fieldwork with the gannets. As you can see, I look kind of angry here, but I think it's just because they're so heavy. After weighing several of them, your arm starts to get tired. But yeah, this research, we were tracking the gannets, looking at where they go, and how that links to their breeding success. So I love fieldwork, I love seabirds. I kind of stuck with that, and I found myself on the Isle of May in Scotland, so one of the bigger islands in the Firth of Forth, big seabird colony, working for Nature Scot as their long-term volunteer throughout the summer. So I got loads more hands-on research, lots of public engagement experience, and then I ended up starting a PhD with St Andrews University, where I got to do more fieldwork with gulls on the Isle of May. So this time I was looking at the relationship between diet and physiology and behaviour in herring and lesser black-backed gull chicks. So looking at where the adults go to feed, what they feed the chicks, how does this affect physiology and behaviour. So I spent a lot of my time in this tiny hide, watching the gulls and collecting regurgitate samples. You might think it's the Isle of May, it's quite rural, the gulls will be foraging at sea. No, they are in the tips, bacon sandwiches, as you can see here. So yeah, really, really interesting. But as we know, COVID happened, and unfortunately this really affected my research. I couldn't collect any more data, so I didn't end up finishing my PhD. But I feel like it's all valuable skills that I learned, and things set us back. So although it took me a while to get over it, I think I've got some amazing experience from my time doing research up there. And I've done various other bits and pieces with Orca, with BirdLife Malta, and with Natural England. And now I find myself at Sunderland City Council working specifically on the Coast Project as one of their Coast Project officers. So, back to coastal designations in Sunderland. Now, I usually say that when I do this talk in Sunderland, I say we've got amazing, beautiful beaches in Sunderland. Everyone agrees with me. But I'm thinking tonight maybe not everyone will agree because we're not in Sunderland. So I'm just going to say that we do have some fantastic sections of the coastline in Sunderland. But areas of the coastline have actually been designated as internationally important, and these sites are protected under European law because of the rich variety of wildlife and habitats that we have there. So they're known as European protected sites. I'm sure people here will be very familiar with that term. But just to explain the different sites we have, because there's different levels, national legislation, we have sites such as SSSIs and NNRs, so that's your sites of special scientific interest, and national nature reserves, so kind of where there's interest features at a local level that need conserving. Then we've got sites that are underpinned by European law, so things like special protection areas specifically for birds, special areas of conservation where they're underpinned by habitats directives, so more about different habitat species we have there. And then sites that are set up under more global agreements, like Ramsar sites, specifically for wetlands, and marine protected areas as well, which I won't go into today. So what do we have in Sunderland? We have 3 European protected sites, different sections along the Sunderland coastline. We've got the Northumbria Coast Special Protection Area, the SBA, and the Northumbria Coast Ramsar site. So they are designated because we have internationally important populations of wading birds and breeding terns. So that's what the SBA and Ramsar sites are there for. In Sunderland, we don't have any breeding terns. We don't have Arctic or little terns breeding along the Sunderland coastline. They're more up in Northumberland. But we do have a lot of wading birds over the winter, including the turnstone and the purple sandpiper. We also have sections of the Durham Coast Special Area of Conservation, the SAC, and that's designated because of our vegetated sea cliffs. So it's actually really interesting. We have the only UK example of these vegetated sea cliffs, these grasslands that are on magnesium limestone. So because of the environment that these grasslands are in, they're on limey soil, they're exposed to salt from the sea, there's erosion happening. It creates a lovely, unique mosaic of different plant assemblages. So it's a really rare habitat that obviously we want to protect. So just to kind of map that visually, you can see we've got the South Tyneside, Sunderland and Durham coastline. The red is Sunderland, the red boundary line. I'll show up with the mouse. The green is where we have all 3 designated sites, all 3 European protected sites, so the SAC, the SBA and the Ramsar. And you can see that extends right up into the border of Sunderland. As we get into North Sunderland, we have a small section of the SPA, so that's the protected site that's important for the wading birds. And then as we get into South Sunderland, it starts to have all 3 sites represented as well. So that's the sites that we have. You might be thinking, well, there's not that much in the north, just a small section of the SPA. But as you can see, we are right on the boundary of South Tyneside, and the birds don't know the difference. They don't know if they're in South Tyneside or Sunderland. So it's important that we capture that as well, and we'll look at everything along the coastline. So we know where they are, but why is it important? How do we make sure they're protected? Well, Sunderland City Council have a legal responsibility to protect the features of our European designated sites. So to protect the grasslands, the vegetated sea cliffs we have in South Sunderland, and to protect the populations of wading birds we get over the winter. And the European law that underpins the designations kind of makes Sunderland Council, as the local competent authority, have to assess any projects, any plans that they might authorise. They have to assess them and make sure that they're not going to have a negative effect on the European sites and on the features of those sites. And this is done by a habitat regulations assessment. So I'm not sure if we've got any planners or ecologists in the room. Will have definitely heard of this term, but it's essentially a step-by-step tool that assesses any activities, so any plan, any project, any development that might negatively impact on the features or the sites. And the assessment tool looks to identify any likely significant effects. And essentially, the HRA and Sunderland as the local competent authority have to ensure that any projects, any plans that are given the go-ahead will not adversely affect the integrity of the European site. So a HRA is done, a decision will be made and it will be sent to Natural England and they'll then agree or disagree. So it could be, we want to do this plan or project, and that could be through the council themselves or through an external party applying for permission through the council. And Natural England might say, no, absolutely not, or they might say yes, but you need this mitigation, or they might say yes, there's no likely significant effects. So that's kind of a very basic overview of the process. So what about Sunderland? Well, we know there's lots of housing development, lots of new houses going up in Sunderland, particularly in the south, where we have the South Sunderland growth area. So as part of the council's core strategy and development plan, they did a HRA to look at what were the likely significant effects of all this development being passed through. Can it go ahead? Is it too dangerous? Will it affect the coastal sites that we have? The HRA found that the proposed development would increase recreational pressure and disturbance on the coastal protected sites. And again, if we look at that map, you can see now there is a black line pretty much down the middle of Sunderland. That is a 7.2 kilometre buffer, and the HRA said that any development within 7.2 kilometres of the coastal European site was likely to lead to increased recreational pressure and increased disturbance. So how do we kind of mitigate for that? Well, a recreation mitigation strategy was undertaken by Footprint Ecology, and this looked at all the measures that could be put in place to try and mitigate the impacts of this increased recreational pressure. One of the key things that came out was the fact that all developers would have to pay a developer contribution fee, so a flat fee of £557.14 per dwelling for any residential development within that 7.2 kilometres. So everyone has to pay into that. So if anyone's bought a new build or knows of anyone buying a new build in Sunderland, then thank you, because I have my job. But the mitigation strategy looked at all the different impacts of more housing, more people, more dogs. What would that bring? And they kind of produced these 7 main impacts. So the first one is increased dog fouling. So more people, more dogs, more dog fouling. How might that affect the grasslands, different nutrients? What could that do? Direct trampling as a result of more people using the coast. The spread of non-native invasive species, so Himalayan balsam, we've just heard, can travel far and wide. We do have it in Sunderland. It does get everywhere. So, yeah, but also things like garden waste, dumping of garden waste, more non-native plants kind of getting to the coast. How might that impact the native plants that we have here and the important assemblages of those coastal grasslands? Also things like inappropriate management, barbecues and fires. And then this last impact, which is the disturbance to our wintering wading birds. And that's the one that we're really interested in, because that directly affects those 2 SPA species that we know use the coast in the winter. So recreational disturbance, it kind of is what it says. It's any recreational activities that could impact the features of interest of a protected site. So any activities that might damage the grasslands, damage the habitats in South Sunderland, and any activities that might cause disturbance to our turnstones and our purple sandpipers. So I've put these down as examples, but could be anything that happens along the coast that could sort of impact the different features. But how does disturbance impact our wading birds? Well, we know that turnstones and purple sandpipers, they migrate thousands of miles down from their breeding grounds. So they'll breed high up in the Arctic, on the tundra, they'll breed in Canada. They'll come further south to winter along our coastline. And this is when they need to sort of build up all the energy they can, rest, feed up, before they then make their journey back north in the summer to breed again. These species forage within the intertidal zone, so when the tide is out at low tide, they've got access to loads of different pools, seaweed, muddy bays. They can forage on different invertebrates and feed at low tide. But it also means they have quite a limited time to feed and gain energy, because when it's high tide, those rock pools, that nice feeding habitat disappears. So the problem is, because they have this limited time to feed, if they're then disturbed by humans, by dogs, they're not able to feed at low tide. But if they're disturbed when they're roosting at high tide, when they need to conserve energy, it's just like a complete imbalance, and they can't build up the energy that they need. So they're constantly trying to feed and build it up and rest. And if they're being disturbed all the time, we know that this can have a negative impact on their fitness and potentially survival. So it might not be that they die while they're here in the winter. They might make it back to their breeding grounds, but it could impact how successful they are in that season. So they might not produce viable eggs, which again will have a long-term effect on populations. So it can be, really impactful. And we're not talking about kind of one-off instances where people say, oh, my dog chased the birds, but they flew away and then they came back down and started feeding again. It was only 10 seconds. That kind of interaction probably won't have a negative effect on individuals, but we're talking about repeated disturbance. So if anyone's been to Seaburn Beach at low tide on a sort of a busy day, there can be a lot of people there, and these birds can just be flushed all the time. Recently I was down at the coast, and there was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a sausage dog meetup. There was like thousands of sausage dogs on the beach. So that's the level that we're talking about. It's big groups. It's a big amount of disturbance all the time. So I just thought we'd quickly go through our key wading birds that we have along the Sunderland coastline. So we've got different species, but these are the ones that we typically see. So our star species, the purple sandpiper, like I said before, they breed high up in the tundra in the Arctic, and they come to winter here. We don't have huge numbers like you might see in Northumberland, but we know we still have a percentage of the population. It's still internationally important, so we still need to protect the habitat and make sure they can thrive here and rest and do all the things they need to do. Our lovely turnstones, a lot of them breed up in Canada, and they'll spend the winter with us. These are just the most fascinating birds to watch. They're like little scavengers. They really do what their name suggests. They have a slight upturned bill, and they'll use it to flick over rocks and stones. So you'll see them foraging on the seaweed, on the rocky shore, flicking stones over to get invertebrates and things. But there's been reports of them feeding on decomposing bodies as well. So they really are quite a scavenger species. And in Sunderland, there's an area in Hendon where they kind of occupy a car park, and you'll just see them waiting underneath people's windows, just chancing their luck, hoping that people drop things. So they do have a very varied diet. The Dunlin is another one of our wading birds. So they breed kind of on moorland and boggy areas in Scotland and the Pennines. Redshank, gorgeous bird. Find them a lot on estuaries. They breed on salt marshes. Really nice to see. Sanderling, so typically we'll see this species running in between the waves. So they're probably about the same size as the Dunlin, although this photo doesn't look like it. And but they're much brighter, and yeah, they're on the kind of sandy beaches, running in and out of the waves. They have a very distinct run that looks a little bit like a clockwork toy. So if you kind of squint down on the coast and you see birds running in and out of the waves, it'll typically be the sanderling. Ringed plover, so we don't have any breeding pairs in Sunderland, but just in South Tyneside in 2023 they had the first ringed plover chick fledge, and then last year they had 3 chicks fledge, so we know that there's breeding habitat sort of available. I know there's lots that breed in Northumberland as well, so there's no reason why we couldn't have them breeding. I think the main impact probably will be disturbance and whether their nests are trampled. That is typically the biggest barrier for them breeding. So we always keep our sort of eyes peeled as we get towards the breeding season and see if there's any pairs prospecting, looking for nesting sites, but no evidence so far, but we'll have another look this summer. The curlew, our largest wading bird. I'm sure everyone here knows how sort of bad curlews have been hit and how much they're in decline, so anytime we see them is really nice. They use the coast, but they also use the farmland and the functional fields that are sort of adjacent to the coast. It's where we often see them. And the oyster catcher, our lovely noisy squeaky bird. So yeah, again, we don't have any breeding in Sunderland, but they will breed along the coast in the UK and further inland as well. I actually saw one once breeding right in the middle of a really busy roundabout in Scotland, so they can pick some crazy places to nest. So if we go back to our recreation mitigation strategy, the report found that they were the main impacts. What are the measures that they suggested we do to try and mitigate these impacts? It said that a package of mitigation measures would be required. So this involves dedicated staff to do awareness raising, education and interpretation, and the enhancement of existing green spaces and monitoring. So this is where the Sunderland Coast project came from. So essentially, the Coast project seeks to protect the landscape and its wildlife by engaging with residents and visitors and encouraging safe and responsible enjoyment of our coastline. So the project was first established in 2017. Originally it was just to cover South Sunderland and just to capture the South Sunderland growth area that I talked about, all that housing development happening in the south. And then a few years later it was expanded into the north to capture the sites that we do have in the north, and because of development happening in North Sunderland as well. So we sit in the ecology team of the council, but like I mentioned before, we're entirely funded through those developer contributions. So all the money is captured through Section 106 agreements, which are tied into planning policy, so completely separate in many ways from the council and how we're funded. And there are 2 Coast Project officers, so myself and my colleague Sam, and we work full-time entirely just on the Coast Project. So it's a really nice role in that the delivery areas that we have are quite broad, quite varied, and I'm just going to take you through sort of some of the key ones that we do for the project. So first up, we do different species monitoring. In the winter, we do monthly wintering bird surveys, so to capture the number of wading birds that we have along the coast and the different species that we're seeing. So this involves doing bird counts, counting what's there, 1 high and 1 low tide survey per month between September and April. So we split up the sections into North and South Sunderland because we've got the giant port in the middle. So it's 1 high, 1 low for North and for South every month. So we follow the BTO methodology of the wetland bird survey. So I put a little asterisk because we're not entirely, we're not doing webs entirely, but it's very similar methodology. We just do a low tide survey as well and not on a Sunday. And all of our data is sent directly to the Environmental Records Information Centre in the North East, so it can be used widely, and they helped us set up our monitoring forms as well. So I don't want to talk too much about the data, but just to kind of give you a snapshot of the sort of numbers that we have. We've got the turnstone total species abundance, that's the total number across all surveys in that season for turnstone and purple sandpiper. And then we've got the peaks, which are the highest count of any one species across a single survey that season. So you can see the turnstone in the sort of dark blue, numbers have been sort of steadily increasing over the years, and they dipped in the 2022-2023 season, but then last season they were back up again. The purple sandpiper, we have much lower numbers. We kind of don't have big counts of them, but they tend to fluctuate a little bit more. So the highest that we had in 2023-2024 season was 108 total abundance across all the surveys. So there's a range of factors that could affect these numbers. Things like food availability, obviously they migrate down from the north. We don't know at this point if things like climate change, warming temperatures are affecting how far they're coming. Are they still coming to the northeast coast, but are they not coming as far down as Sunderland? There's a range of factors that could impact these numbers, but it's great that we're able to collect the data ourselves and have evidence, and also look at different hotspots along the coast, look at what areas could be important. Is there any specific locations at high or low tide that the birds are using that we need to be aware of, so that if we do need to put more mitigation measures in place, we know where sort of key hotspot areas are for different species. So we do butterfly monitoring as well. So the Coast Project, I should have said, by the way, I started in September 2023, so quite new, but yeah, before myself and my colleague have been working together for about a year. So there was butterfly monitoring done in the past, but it hasn't been set up with the Butterfly Conservation Trust and not kind of established transect. So we did that last year. We worked with one of the local organisers who came out and helped us set up a whole range of different transects along the grasslands in the south to try and capture the butterfly populations that we have there and look at sort of different species. So although in the south where we have the SAC, that's the Special Area of Conservation, the site designated for the vegetated sea cliffs, we're interested in the habitats. Butterflies are a great indicator of sort of diversity and how well ecosystems are functioning, so we thought it would be really good to get some concrete data annually. And these are the results from last year. So you can see we've got a nice diversity of different species, some good numbers as well. We think it was a really bad year for butterflies last year. But we won't really know until we do more surveys across the years and see how things change. But it's great to have this baseline established now that we can then compare year on year going forward. Disturbance survey trial. So this season we've been trialling doing some actual disturbance surveys, so looking at how the birds respond to different disturbance events that happen along the coast. So again, this is a methodology by footprint ecology, which essentially involves having an area of the beach, of the rocky shore, counting and mapping all the birds that are there for 20 minutes. And then we collect this diary of information, which is recording all the potential disturbance events that might happen. So you kind of record the different activity that's happening on the coast, people walking dogs, people on bikes. And then if they do elicit a behavioural response from the birds, we look at what the birds do, how do they respond, do they stop feeding, do they walk away, do they fly away, do they fly completely out of the the mapped area. And then we will count and map the birds that are left sort of at the end of that time. And we're just trialling that this year to see what data we get. I think it'll be really, really valuable information because, again, it kind of gives us some evidence as to the level of disturbance that's happening. And I think concrete evidence is always great if you need to push for more mitigation measures. And we've found that the trials are working really well, so I think we'll definitely take it forward. We do a little bit of habitat management along the coast. So in the north we have some sand dune habitat management work going on. We've fenced off an area of sand dunes that were just being completely trampled on and sort of not able to regenerate. So we fenced that off and we're seeing new growth coming through, so we think that's working. And we do meadow management as well on 3 sites in the south. So we cut and clear different sections of the grassland to try and establish more wildflower meadows to get an increased diversity of different plants. And that's been going on for a few years now. We are seeing an increase in the diversity of plants there. Got some lovely bee orchids this year, which is great. So we'll continue to do that and hopefully increase the plant diversity. And then invasive species management, so talking about balsam again, we do have issues with balsam, and right on the corner of this meadow there's a lot of balsam. There's a burn running down adjacent to that, so it makes sense they're in those damp areas. But yeah, we kind of don't want it to encroach more on the meadow, so we do some invasive species management of the balsam, sometimes with contractors but also with the public as well. So kind of get people to come down, give them a nice big sword and allow people to really bash the balsam bashing, which everyone seems to love. So keep your eyes peeled if you want to do some balsam bashing this summer. We'll probably be doing it again. We do have antisocial behaviour problems along the coast that we try and deal with. So the main issue we have in South Sunderland is fly tipping, so huge amounts of fly tipping. And that's mainly because of access points, so where people can drive in to the grasslands and the adjacent fields running along the coastal path and essentially just dump things. So we try really hard to work with the landowners to block access to certain areas where we can, but it can be really challenging to get people on board, but also to put in measures that aren't just removed the next day. So I know the project officer before me worked really hard to get a new barrier installed in a location, and then the next day it had been completely cut off. So it's definitely a challenge to try and reduce access where we don't want people to kind of be able to go on and fly tip essentially right near the coastal sites. As part of this, we sit on a coastal antisocial behaviour group, so that's with partners in Durham, so Durham Heritage Coast, and Hartlepool Police, and some PCSOs in Sunderland, to try and work together to kind of have a collaborative approach when it comes to trying to deal with some of the antisocial behaviour problems, and how can we figure out what works best and put measures in place that are working in different areas. Outreach and education is a huge part of the project. Like the mitigation measures said, we want to raise awareness of the project. The dedicated staff measure within the recreation mitigation strategy suggested that a ranger style approach could be adopted. So my colleague Sam and I try to do that. We are out on the coast engaging with people, sharing information. We try and do regular pop-ups where we're sort of in a location for a set amount of time. We chat to people, we talk about the Coast Project and anything that we've got going on. And it's just about trying to get people to understand the sites that we have. Most people are so interested when we tell them that there's, internationally important populations of birds right on their doorstep that they didn't know about. People are really, really interested, and people are kind of keen to do behavioural change. So it's a good approach, we think, to really engage with people on the ground. And last year we put a lot of work into relaunching our website, so updating the information on there, putting lots more information on the different species that we get along the coast, but also on walking routes that maybe take people slightly away from the beaches, so just giving people an idea of where they can walk, that they can still see wildlife, and there's different points and different ideas of what they might see at different times of year, but we know it's not going to have a direct effect on disturbance. Oh, sorry. We are working at the minute on a new communication strategy, and as a result of that we're developing new messaging and new interpretation boards which will go out along the coast. But as we saw before, we've got that 7.2 kilometre buffer zone, and that was based on information from visitor surveys, so we know that we have visitors coming all that way from 7.2 kilometres to the coast to use it on quite a regular basis, so we need to think about how sort of far inland we put the signage and interpretation. Who do we need to target? What communities do we need to get signage up into to get people sort of aware of how they can better protect the coast when they do visit. And we do a lot of partnership work as well. So I mentioned Durham Heritage Coast. We work closely with them and other nature conservation organisations working on projects along the coast. So Stronger Shores, Seascapes when that was still going, and Durham Wildlife Trust as well. But probably our biggest partner relationship is with Coastal Tyneside. So like Sunderland, in order to allow them to do development in South Tyneside, the council found that they would need a mitigation strategy, and they would need to do a project similar to ours. So at that time it was thought, why not join forces, have sort of consistent branding right along the coastline, make it clear to people what our message is. So that's what we've done. It'll really allow us to drive the message forward, and we've got the huge stretch of coastline now, so that we can be consistent and it's clear what we want to achieve. The first thing that we did together was to develop the Coast Code, which is new signage, new graphics to kind of encourage people to look out for birds and also be aware of how the birds are reacting so that they don't disturb them when out and about along the beach. So the code says to look out for birds, give them space. Are they reacting to you or your dog? So really asking people to kind of look at the behaviour of the different birds. What are they doing? Have they stopped feeding? Are they looking at you? Are they running away? Are they flying away? If yes, please give more space. So we've tried to make it clear, but we haven't said, stay 100 metres, stay 50 metres away from the birds, because it can be really difficult for people out on the beach to know what that distance is. Instead, we're trying to encourage people to have a look, see what's there, and kind of understand the behaviour of the birds a little bit more. And if in doubt, give them more space. So this Coast Code will be going up alongside our new interpretation boards. Hopefully it'll be all the way down the coast, and it'll give people to think about when they're out walking along the beach. We do a range of public engagement events, so try to get people involved in the project, get them excited about things, but also spread the message at the same time. So we do all sorts really, from geology walks to rock pooling sessions, litter picks and beach cleans, guided bird walks, wildflower ID sessions, dolphin watching sessions, and then if we're at like a specific event, we'll do tailored activities for different age groups. So yeah, lots of nice public engagement events, and we want people to join us, and we always feel like it's about getting out onto the coast and enjoying it, but then spreading the messages how we can change our behaviour slightly to not have that disturbance and not increase the pressure when we're down on the beach. So as well as our other key delivery areas. These are some projects that we really want to push going forward. So we love the idea of doing a dog ranger project, so specifically targeting dog owners and sort of championing them to have well-behaved dogs along the beach that don't chase the birds. And again, trying to interact and engage with the right communities. So in North Sunderland, it's very commercial. There's a lot of businesses, a lot of cafes. It's very busy areas. So we need to try and involve with people like the local business owners, get them to share our signage, share the coast code, get their customers to really be proud to not cause disturbance when they're down on the beach, because it's these cafes and these businesses that bring a lot of the people down there. So engaging with people like them, and also trying to engage groups that are maybe not as engaged, which is always really difficult to do, but working with different youth clubs in South Sunderland and trying to get different groups of people on board in sort of a more targeted way. And then to develop some specific educational resources to go into schools and do workshops with different age groups and spread the message. I think this photo is from the sausage dog day. You can just see some tiny dogs. So yeah, just to give you an idea, so the protected site starts here, just cut off in the photo. So yeah, it's a kind of level of disturbance that can sometimes happen. Just thought I'd plug some upcoming events that we have in case anyone's interested. So we've got a litter pick, 2 litter picks coming up in February and March, and then on the 15th of March we have a guided bird migration walk at Whitburn with Birdwatch North East. So again, we like to work with different partners and kind of connect different groups and expand the reach. So nice to have some partner events coming up. Yeah, that was a brief overview of sort of the Coast project, how we got there, the background, what we've done to date. This QR code will take you to our website if you are interested in doing any events with us or getting involved. Please contact. But yeah, thank you for listening. I'll take any questions.